In the middle of a dying desert, two drifters stumble upon the largest gold deposit ever found, but when one man stays behind to guard it, he quickly learns the desert has only one rule: survive or be buried. As the heat rises, supplies run out, and strangers close in, his fight for fortune turns into a fight for life. This is Gold, 2022, where greed isn't the real enemy, the desert is. In the endless stretch of a scorching desert, a lone man stepped away from the car to take a leak, nothing unusual, until a glint in the sand caught his eye. He blinked, stepped closer, and froze. Right beneath him was a massive, shimmering chunk of gold. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should call out. He glanced back at his buddy, Anthony, who was crouched by the car repairing the engine, but excitement got the better of him, and he finally yelled, "Hey! Come look at this! I'm serious, get over here!" Anthony jogged over, took one quick look at the golden rock, and without saying a word, immediately pulled out a flamethrower. He blasted the rock with a jet of fire, expecting the shine to melt away his fake gold, but the thing stayed bright, solid, untouched, and unmistakably real. That was when panic mixed with excitement. The two men grabbed every tool they had and began digging like madmen, constantly looking around, terrified that someone might pass by and discover their impossible luck. But the deeper they dug, the more impossible the discovery became. They dug for hours, half a day under brutal heat, yet still couldn't find the edge of the gold. Anthony's patience was gone. They tried shoving it, kicking it, and finally pushing it together with all their strength. It didn't move an inch. Then Anthony had another idea. They tied a thick rope around the gold and hooked it to the car. He hit the gas, the rope broke instantly. They tried again, but the gold didn't even tremble. At this point they both realized something terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't just a gold nugget, it might actually be an entire gold mountain, buried beneath the desert. They dug more, and the pit got larger and deeper, yet the gold continued in every direction. As the sun began to set and the temperature dropped sharply, the two had no choice but to set up camp. They built a fire next to the gold, laughed around it, and celebrated their future wealth, imagining mansions, cars, and a life where they'd never have to work again. But as the excitement faded, reality hit them. No matter how valuable the gold was, they had no way of moving it. That was when Anthony suggested a plan. One of them should return to town and bring back an excavator to dig the entire thing out. The other had to stay behind and guard the gold. "No way both of us leave," he said. "Someone else finds this and it's over." Anthony, confident in his survival skills, volunteered to stay, but the man immediately rejected that idea. If he left Anthony alone with the gold, there was no guarantee he wouldn't take it for himself. After a tense argument, Anthony finally gave in. The next morning they divided their supplies, but Anthony secretly took most of the water, claiming the car needed it to cool the engine during the long drive. The man didn't argue. In just a few days, both of them would be rich beyond imagination. Once Anthony drove away, the man quickly buried the gold again to hide it from sight. He tied up a piece of tarp to a nearby tree, creating a makeshift shade that barely protected him from the blistering sun. He had to survive the night, alone, with limited food and water, and a treasure that could make or break his life. On the third day, he went out to collect firewood. Desert nights were brutally cold, and he needed something to stay warm. But while searching, he stumbled upon the wreckage of an old crashed airplane. Curious, he approached it cautiously. Inside were metal walls, scattered debris, and relatively secure shelter, perfect for hiding from wild animals, and far safer than his flimsy tarp tent. The only problem, the plane wreck was too far from the gold. He couldn't afford to lose sight of it, so he tore off metal pieces from the plane, tied them with rope, and slowly dragged them through the desert sand, until he built a sturdier shelter right beside the buried treasure. Finally exhausted, he lay down and drifted off to sleep without realizing it. He woke up the next morning to sunlight cutting through the gaps in his shelter, burning his face. Blisters had formed across his forehead, angry and swollen. Every touch felt like knives slicing into his skin. But when he looked out at the gold, all he could think was, "It's worth it. All of this is worth it." But the situation was getting worse. His food was nearly gone, and he felt dizzy with hunger. Suddenly, a snake slithered by, probably venomous, but at this point he didn't care. Food was food. He lunged for it, missed, and in the chaos, he knocked over his last half bottle of water, spilling it into the sand. Day 4, he dragged himself back to the plane wreck to scavenge more materials. But when he looked up, he froze. A woman was walking straight toward him, heart pounding, terrified she'd discover the gold. He hid inside the plane and tried to make the gold invisible beneath scrap metal. He faked sleep, but she spotted him immediately. He climbed out, trying to look casual. She asked what he was doing out here. He lied, said he was just wandering, just surviving. She offered him food, but he refused, afraid she'd stay and investigate. But she wasn't fooled. she sat down right in front of him and began eating loudly, deliberately, each bite echoing in the quiet desert, tormenting the starving man. When she finally stood up as if to leave, she instead followed him closely, matching every step, until she reached the area near the buried gold. He pretended to tidy his shelter, hoping she'd go away, but she circled him like a predator. "Well, I think you're hiding something," she said coldly. "You're lying, little rat. You didn't end up out here by accident. You're plotting something, I can smell it." The woman had already realized the truth about the gold. The man panicked, terrified that his once-in-a-lifetime fortune was about to slip away. In desperation, he grabbed a metal rod and slammed it into her head, never expecting it would kill her instantly. Shaken to the core, he stripped her body of every supply she carried, and chugged her water like he'd been dying of thirst. At least now, he thought, he wouldn't starve or dry out. To keep passing cars from spotting the corpse, he dug a shallow pit and buried her, but he never imagined a wild dog would drag the body back out. He rushed to chase it away, but the dog didn't fear him. It barked, summoning the entire pack. They surrounded him, silent and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As night fell, he quickly gathered wood, lit a massive fire, and burned the body to ash. Only then did a wave of confusion hit him. He had killed a stranger just for gold. By day 5, the stolen food was gone. That's when Anthony finally called. "You alive? I got the excavator. This damn thing's slowing me down." Anthony told him to keep guarding the gold, then hung up. But the man was reaching his limit. A car passed nearby. He wanted to scream for help, but one look at the hidden gold, and he swallowed his cry. When the car vanished, regret washed over him. Moments later, a sandstorm roared in. His makeshift shelter was shredded instantly. He grabbed the chunk of gold and ran, but a tree trunk, hurled by the storm, slammed into him. When he woke up, he realized a thick branch had pierced straight through his abdomen. The pain was unbearable, but even then, he crawled toward the gold, and when his hand touched the cold metal beneath the sand, he finally relaxed. Greed drowned out every warning in his brain. He tore the branch out with his bare hands, lit dry grass on fire, heated a soda can, and pressed it against his wound to seal it shut. The agony knocked him out cold. In his haze, he saw the burned woman standing beside him. He jolted awake only when his satellite phone rang. Just another hallucination. Anthony again, repeating the same message: "Hold the gold. Don't move." Clinging to his last hope of becoming rich, he crawled back to the gold and buried every piece. Suddenly, a stranger appeared behind him, a woman who looked exactly like the one he killed. She offered to help him find water, treat his wounds, even save his life. "You'll die if you don't," she warned. Trying to stay calm, he ordered her to leave, but then she asked a question that made his blood run cold. "So, you didn't see my sister?" She was the dead woman's sibling. Panicking, he shook his head. The body was ashes. No one could prove anything. She left, disappointed. He fainted again. When he woke, his entire camp was surrounded by lit fire pits. The woman had made them to keep the wild dogs away, but he'd been unconscious too long. The flames were dying, and the dogs were circling. Noticing his weakness, they attacked. He called Anthony, begging him to return. Silence. The wild dogs dragged him across the sand, pulling him farther and farther from the buried gold. If he had just walked away with one small piece, he could have lived, but greed chained him there until his dying breath. What he never knew was that Anthony was already nearby. He'd come back long ago, but kept calling with excuses to stall him. Tomorrow got delayed. Just hold on. All eyes, Anthony had pitched camp in secret, watching the man starve, bleed, and get torn apart. Only when he was absolutely sure the man was dead did he put out his cigarette, start the truck towing the excavator, and head to the gold. He was moments away from claiming it all, when an arrow shot straight through his chest. He dropped beside the gold, and the corpse of his friend, the hunter, had become the hunted. Someone had discovered the gold long before, but chose to leave it. When they couldn't take it, the man, blinded by greed, refused to walk away, and paid the ultimate price. And the arrow, no doubt about it, it came from the woman. She must have known about the gold too. And in the end, she became the one who walked away with everything. So, what do you think about gold? 2022, was the man a victim of bad luck and betrayal, or did his own greed seal his fate from the start? Do you think you would have walked away with a single piece, or stayed behind for the whole mountain? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and if you want more wild survival thrillers like this, don't forget to like, share, and follow the channel for the next recap.